morning, everybody, and welcome to another fine day here at Paul Pape Designs. This is another sponsored stream brought to you by Super Sculpey, or Polyform, the makers of Super Sculpey. Today we're going to be working with a very interesting product. We're going to be working with liquid clays, and the reason that I wanted to work with you with that today is because I wanted to show you some faux finishes that you can do with this product. It's a very different medium than we're used to working with. Typically we work with a really rigid material like a clay, the different types of clays, and we've gone over things like armatures and such before, but today we're gonna actually try doing something a little bit different, and I think we're gonna have a lot of fun with it. So shall we get to it? Now the thing that we're gonna be working with, like I mentioned before, is this liquid clay. Now Sculpey has a wide variety of them, and I have them here that we're going to try most of them, if not all of them, today. And what it does is it allows us to create pieces that are marbleized or have a texture or a quality to it that you can't necessarily get without painting. And then this way it's actually built into it. You can here's a demo piece that I created yesterday, just really quickly, using a silicone mold and the Liquid Sculpey. And this is using 3 different colors of the Sculpey liquid clay, as well as a backer using some of this Primo accents. We actually were using this one here, the glitter white one that we have here. So we're going to be using some of these to create faux marbling effects. We're going to be using a silicone mold as a demonstration, as well as painting some of our pieces that we've done in the past. You might recognize this guy from one of the first ones that we did. And then we've got this other piece that many of you who follow me on my stream should be intimately familiar with, as known as James's Dragon. So this is the miniature version of James's Dragon that we have here, but we're gonna do some finishes on that as well. Some of the things that you're gonna need for this to work along with it is gonna be some of the Liquid Sculpey. Some of the materials that we'll use, like I said before, is this clear clay here, or the liquid clay here. We have the transparent one, which I really like, which dries, believe it or not, transparent. But we also have another one that I've been using a lot of, and that is this translucent one. And I love this translucent one for doing marbling. And you'll see how that works in just a little bit. Since we're going for high contrast, like I have here on this demo piece, you can see here on this demo piece that we did here, I used black and white so that we could get the highest contrast that we could. We can also work with subtler colors as well, like the gold and the silver. We also have straight up white, black, which I just showed you here, and as well as the translucent and the clear. We also have a pearl color, which is also in the white. It's just going to give us a little bit more shimmer to it as well. Okay, so these are going to be the liquid clays that we're going to touch on, and then I'm going to show you how to get these types of effects with it. And then we're going to do some texturing with it, and then creating some looks with over the top of a surface. When we're working in a mold like this, we're going to be building from the top surface down or into it so that we get a solid finish on the outside. So this is nice and smooth. It's going to actually mimic what's inside the mold here. And we're also going to be working with texture on top of a sculpt. When you're using a mold, we're going to be building from the back, from the top, the surface backwards. Whereas if we work from the on top of a surface, like on this, say on this dragon sculpture, we're going to be able to create a texture that's on top of it. Okay. The other thing that you're going to need is a heat gun and an oven. I've got my oven preheated to 270 degrees Fahrenheit. On the packaging for most Sculpey products or polymer clays, you'll see that it asks for 275 degrees Fahrenheit. I like to keep mine at a little bit under, and the reason that is because especially in an electric oven like I have, the temperature is going to drop to a certain point before the thermostat kicks on, which is typically 5 to 10 degrees below what you're trying to maintain at. But then once it starts to warm, it's going to go above the temperature as well, so that it can keep drifting up and down. That's how an oven works, and that's how the thermostat works. And so I like to set my temperature just a little bit low, to about 270, 265 to 270. Right now it's at 270. So that way when the heat does kick back on, it's not going to scorch the clay. It's not going to overcook it, because we don't want it to be an uneven bake there. CryoSphinx wants to know, do I have any sort of fancy oven or do I use my own kitchen oven? My wife has banned me from using the kitchen oven, not because there's anything wrong with cooking the clay in it. It's just that at times I have the clay baking for hours and she'd like to have access to the oven. So I have a dedicated oven for it. It is actually, I went down to my local hardware store and I bought a smoker. Basically indoor outdoor smoker for meat, and I plugged up all the holes so that it doesn't smoke anymore. And the reason that I did that is because I wanted a large volume oven that had fairly decent circulation. I don't like using a clay oven that is small like a toaster oven because the heating element is too close to the clay and you can lead to scorching. So I want one that's got a fairly large volume inside, also so that I can work on larger pieces. And so I've got a smoker oven that I have a door on there. It's a wonderful one. It's called a Mastercraft, but it's got a timer on it. So I actually set it and it will go up to the time, and then once the timer hits, it actually turns itself off. So I don't have to worry about it being overbaked or lasting too long. So it'll cook for exactly how long I would like it to. So I have a dedicated oven for it. It works a lot better. Also, if you accidentally burn your clays, it's not recommended that you use it for food after that without doing a really, really thorough cleaning. And so since I work with clay a lot, I don't have a tendency to burn my clay, but I can do what's called over baking. And so I want to make sure that the oven that I use is specifically for the clays. Does the clay have a nice smoky flavor as well? Hopefully not, unless you're doing it wrong. No, I don't add any of the wood chips or anything like that into my smoker. My smoker is just basically converted into an oven. That way I didn't have to buy an oven, because a smoker you can get for about $100, maybe $150. Especially right about now, as we're entering in the fall, a lot of people are not doing grilling, and so they're all going on sale, which is really nice. And so I bought one of those. If I would have bought a regular convection oven, I would have been paying for a lot more stuff I don't need, like broilers and the stovetop and all that, and it would cost hundreds of dollars as opposed to the single one. Thanks, I would never have thought about using a smoker. That's using your noggin. Well, I do try my best there. So, but yes, so I do have a nice oven, and I keep it in a different room. My room is actually vented, and that is again for the same reason. It doesn't smoke, and I know I said I have a smoker, but a smoker is basically just an oven with the ability to smoke if you were going to do like smoking meats or vegetables, but I remove that aspect of it, or the smoker out of it, and then seal it up. And you can seal it up. They usually have vent holes on it and such. I had some metal that I used in there as well to kind of like plug it up. And I'll do a walkthrough of it on a different video and kind of put it up there on Twitch as well as onto YouTube, so you guys can see how I converted it. But all right, let's get to it. So one of the things that I really like about this clay is that it is a liquid. I do a lot of faux finishing with the pieces that I build for commission, such as the ring boxes and such. And this black and white marbling is one of the things that I am most often requested to do. And I can do this technique with paint over a piece that has been made out of clay and such. But the problem that you run into with that is if you hold it up to the light on a painted piece, you actually see the brushstrokes are on top of the clay, and so, or the base piece that you have there, and it kind of breaks the illusion that it's actually marble, a nice finished piece of marble. Whereas using this liquid clay and building up the marbling technique from the reverse, and you'll get a nice finish that is actually built in. I mean, that's the clay is actually there. And if I scrape at it or anything like that, the clay actually has the marble built into it. And then if you notice, you back it up. Basically, when you're doing the liquid clay, you're building a film, okay? And depending on how thick you want that to be, you can back it with another clay, with a different colored clay. I used white in this case because I wanted to see the white shine through here, but you can use any color that you want to get a wide variety of different types of techniques and finishes. One thing that I really like to do with this is use this translucent down goes the dragon, is use this translucent liquid clay, which gives it's a semi-opaque, and so you can actually see different colors coming through the back. And I'll demonstrate that by using some of the silver and copper clay that we have here. Okay, so let's get started. This is an old mold that I created. It's a silicone mold. I just went to a hobby store and happened to have some silicone lying around, and I had a half dome sphere. This is actually, for those of you who follow me a lot, I make a lot of Pokeballs. This was actually so that I could do a liquid resin version of them. And I thought, well, what a nice simple way of showing this technique, and then how well the material actually grips by back painting inside of a silicone mold of a sphere here. You can use pretty much anything that you've got. It doesn't even have to be silicone. Silicone helps it come out a little bit easier, but as long as you use some kind of mold release or such, you can actually paint into a wide variety of pieces. One thing that you could do to achieve a really, really nice gloss finish on this is to start with a clear, okay, a clear transparent. Now, I will say that whenever you're using a mold, especially something like a silicone mold, the finish inside the mold is going to be the finish that you achieve when you pull the piece out. If the mold itself is kind of dingy or matte, you're going to get a matte finish on the piece that goes in there. If your mold is really shiny, okay, you're going to get a really shiny finish out of it. Because especially with when you're transferring liquids into a mold here, the liquid is going to pick up all of the little nuances that are inside of your mold. And so if you notice here on this piece, it's matte because the mold here is matte. And this is actually taken from a piece of wood that I molded, as opposed to like a glass bead or something like that. How many layers of clay in the half sphere? Well, as you can see, this is just that's a great question, Greek. Thank you. The liquid clay, it's about 6 layers, and then I did a really, really thin 1/16 of an inch thin backing of it with this white clay. And then I could actually go in there if I wanted to and fill this back in with even more, because if you notice, it's got a little bit of flex to it. Okay, that's because it's not very thick. Okay, but if I wanted to kind of thicken it up a little bit more, I can always go in and backfill it with more colors. So the other thing that I want to show you guys that on how to use this is when we start to pour this material in here, you're going to notice it's got some thickness to it. Okay, and obviously that's intentional. We want it to have some thickness, because if it was just like water, it would just go everywhere. The thing is it's really hard initially to thin that material out, to feather the edges. And when you're doing something like a marbling effect, you want to be able to feather the edges out, especially on one end. And that's what's going to give you the illusion that the clay, that the marbling vein goes down deep inside the clay, or the base itself. And how we achieve that is by thinning the liquid clay. There's 2 different ways that you can do it. One is to buy Liquid Sculpey, or not a Liquid Sculpey, but basically it's a small bottle of clay. It's the polymer that goes in there. It's the softening agent that you can buy. It is actually made by Sculpey, by Polyform, and you can use it to like add longevity to your polymer clays. Okay. The other option that you can use, and it's one that I actually prefer, but you have to use it in a dedicated oven, is to use naphtha. Okay, naphtha is basically the main ingredient in lighter fluid. And the reason that I like this one is, one, it's evaporative. Okay, but it does smell like lighter fluid. So if you're cooking your dinner inside of an oven, when you go to bake this off, you can let it evaporate naturally, because since it is just a petroleum, it will evaporate naturally over time. So you can leave it outside, or just leave it on your desk before you go and cook it, and it will eventually outgas itself. Or when you cook it, it'll actually evaporate it all out of there. So we're going to be using a little bit of this as well to help us thin the line. I'm going to use this little tray here. Unfortunately, if I leave this on the screen, it's going to affect my white balance really, really bad. So I'm just going to leave it kind of off to the side. But if I say I'm softening the clay, it is because I'm using a little bit of the lighter fluid. We just need something that we can dip a brush into. And we are going to be using brushes for this. Now, the benefit of that is that we're going to be able to have a lot more control over how we use the clay and where it goes. The downside is that you're going to gum up your brush a little bit with clay, liquid clay. It's the same thing as if you were smoothing regular Super Sculpey or any of the other Sculpey projects using naphtha. You're going to get a little bit of a buildup in here. The bonus is that it's really easy to clean up by using a little bit more naphtha to help break down the polymers in there, and then just clean it up using some paper towels or whatnot. All right. So first thing we want to do is I'm going to do this exact same technique with the black and white. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to open up our liquid bakeable clay here from Sculpey. Now, when you buy them brand new, they come with two different types of lids. One of them looks like an old school, like white glue type of twist open top here, like you would get in glue. And then we've got a couple bottles, mostly with the black and the white here, that actually come with this click-on cap here. All right. What I noticed is that I fought really hard to push the clay out of it, and that's because it actually was sealed. And I think the white one is still sealed, whereas the other ones are not. Okay. Yeah, you can see there's a little sealant in here. And so just remember, and it came off with the cap, which is why I couldn't figure out, and it was the same color as the clay that I was using. And so I was like, why is nothing coming out of here? And it's because there is this little foil inside here to keep it from leaking out all over the place. Just remember to pull that out. And it's only on this white and the black one with this special capped lid. Okay. The rest of them come just closed like the old Elmer's glue or school glue that you got. Okay. All right. So we're going to start with the black. And here's the thing with marbling and such, know your research, have research, go on the internet. That's the great thing about the internet these days, is if you are going to look for if you're trying to reproduce something, if you're trying to faux finish something, make sure that you've got the research in front of you so that you know what that looks like. Okay. If your memory is not as good as you think it is, as far as research goes, and if you want something to look really, really realistic, you need to know your research. Okay. So, fortunately for me, black and white marble is something that I do a lot, but I do have a research image up on my monitor over here just so that I can see it. And the thing with marble is that we see these beautiful veins like this, okay? But what in reality is happening is they're cutting the marble at an angle, okay? If this was a square piece as opposed to a sphere, what we would actually be looking at is the sedimentary layers like this. So the earth, where this marble slab was pulled from, would be layers and layers of sediment that have been compressed together to form the stone. And the veining that you see in there is something like an ash or there's a different mineral that is laid over and then being compressed into it. When they cut marble so that we can see the most marbling in the marble, they actually cut it at a diagonal, and that's what gives us the one hard edge, okay, because that's where the vein is actually coming through. But then the feathering that you see that goes deeper into the marbling, that is the edge cut, so that we're seeing, instead of it being flat, like if we looked at this one and the layers are just layered one on top of the other, it would just be white, black, white, black, white, black. Swanee is having flashbacks to her geology classes. That's right, because if you don't know how things happen, it's really hard to reproduce, even faux finish wise. So what we want to do is we want to kind of cut into that diagonally into it. And so what we're going to do is pull away from one edge to kind of feather out that one edge to give it that look of marbling in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a simple line, okay? And we're just going to paint with this stuff. And it's thick. It's thick enough that it actually like holds its own. Okay, and I pressed a little too hard into the mold there, so we're just going to come in here and fill it back in. And as you can see, if I hold it this way, it will not drip. Okay, it will not drip. It won't run. That's a good thing. Okay, we want it to stay exactly where it's at. I'm going to open up my naphtha here, my lighter fluid, and I'm just going to add a little bit to the tray here. Now it will evaporate, so if I don't want to put too much in here because it will eventually disappear. Now taking a brush, we're going to leave this top edge, the edge that's facing this direction, we're going to leave that alone. Okay, we want to pull down on the edge towards the middle here. So we're going to grab about halfway up and we're just going to kind of pull it down. And we're just going to start this way. And as you notice, it's thick and it's got solid tint all the way around it. Now we don't want to be uniform. That's the other thing that a lot of people mistake, is that they do everything very uniform. Humans love patterns. And we've talked about this when doing textures on our sculptures as well. We want to avoid doing patterns, even though we are naturally inclined to do so. So what we're doing is we're just pulling down the one edge of the clay like that. All right, and now here's where the naphtha is going to come in handy here. So I'm going to take a little bit of the naphtha on my brush. Okay, so it's basically just liquid in here, and you can see we're going to come in here and we're just going to kind of fuzz up this edge. That's right, technical term there, fuzz up. I'm going to use a little bit more. There we go, so I can actually get some liquid in here. So we can come in here and actually fuzz this edge up, okay? And the reason that is we want to lessen this side so that it looks a little cloudy. Okay, there we go. So we're getting some nice cloudiness in here. Now the thing is this is still clay. Absolutely, you can take notes. Please do. And if you notice, we're getting a nice cloudy edge here. Obviously, the closer to this hard line, the thicker it's going to be, okay? The thicker and more prominent the marbling is going to be. But we're just going to thin that one edge. And if you notice here, what I did, and I did it intentionally, it just looks kind of haphazard and stuff. But if you notice right towards the apex of the sphere here, we have the thinnest line. That's because that's technically where, so it's technically where the thinnest part of the marbling would be when it's cut. Whereas we get down to the sides here, and it's going to be slightly thicker. Okay, and so again, just using some of our naphtha to come in here and just make sure that we can thin out the clay. And I'm using a tapping kind of sweeping motion here, okay, to create this look. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to come in with a little bit of the translucent. Okay, we haven't cleaned our brush at all, and I'm just going to lay in a little blob of the translucent. I'm going to clean this brush out. We're going to move to a flat brush here, a bigger flat brush. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to kind of work this material up towards the line. I don't want to interfere too much with the other clay. I just want to kind of move the material around. And what this is going to do is it's going to give us a little bit more depth towards the clay here. Okay, it's going to give us just a little bit more depth, and it's going to make it look, because we're working backwards. Okay, so if you think about the black being on the very top surface, and as we're painting towards us, we're actually getting thicker and thicker and thicker, but it's going to make the outer layer look thinner and like it's coming backwards, which is what we want. Okay, and so we want to make sure that towards the bottom here we have mostly the translucent color. So I'm going to add a little bit more here, and I'm going to. Okay, so a little bit of clay goes a long way. Is a question that Greek had. This liquid clay, it has a fairly decent coverage, yes. Think of it like a craft glue, like a white glue. It does something very similar in that it has that same tendency to skin, kind of like a craft glue would. What's nice about this though is that it actually is becoming the clay itself. It is the clay. Okay, so now you can see that we've added that. Now I have nothing over on this side, and it doesn't come all the way up on the edge over here. It's just this one little line of marble. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add a second line using the black. All right, and then using the same flat brush. Now remember, if the hard edge is on this side, you want the hard edge to be on the same side with this next vein here. Okay, and we're gonna still work that clay, that edge, by drawing it down. With with a tapping and pulling motion. You can see there, it's that same motion. Now it's okay that we have thickness on that line because this is inside. Okay, it's the inside of the mold here, so it's okay if we have some thickness of the line, because when we go to pull it out, it's going to be smooth, just like this. We just want to make sure that the line of the marble is being pulled back so that it fades away, so that it looks like it's actually been cut into it. I'm going to pull some of the material out of here, and then we're going to add a little bit more, and I'm going to add some of the translucent straight to the brush. Okay, because I'm right on the edge of the mold here, so I want to make sure that I don't just overly, I don't want to put too much on here. I just want to make sure that we actually have clay that comes up to the edge, and then we can work the material out here a little bit. All right, and then lastly, we're going to do the same thing with the white on this other side, so I can turn the mold over. And if you notice, I'm not getting any drips or runs with this liquid clay. It's why I really like it. It's really, really kind of fun. Because it stays where you want it. It stays put. So I can actually go in here and add some of the liquid clay there, just like that. And we're going to work this material up to the edge, and then we're going to come a little bit shy of the hard edge there, just for a moment, and I'll show you why. Because we can actually bake this and then keep adding to it. Okay, so we're going to semi-bake this material so that we have some rigidity on there, but we want to make sure that we get most of our shell in place. Okay, now let's grab the heat gun. And this is my handy dandy heat gun. I've had this one for a while now. It's my Milwaukee. The reason I like it is because it has a dial on the back, and it allows me to dial in the temperature. Most modern heat guns, this one is from the 90s. That just shows you how old it is. But most of the modern ones just allow you to have hot and hotter. Okay. If you're going with hot and hotter, keep it on the hot setting. Okay. For me, I want it to be I always keep it between 7 and 8. This thing supposedly gets up to about 1,000 degrees is what it says on the packaging. If I get it to 10, I can actually start fire with it. But if I go too low, it's just like a hair dryer. So I like to keep mine between 7 and 8. Yeah, Swanee says that hers is just a 1 temp. If your heat gun is 1 temp, keep it moving. That's the key to this. You want to make sure that the heat gun stays moving, that you're not sitting in one place, because you can easily scorch your clay. Okay. Okay, since this makes a lot of noise, I'm going to explain what I'm going to do before I turn it on, because I'm going to end up muting this eventually. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cure this clay. What you're going to notice, with the clay is that, oh, look at that. I did get some running because I had it really thick on that end. Woo, look at that. There are no mistakes, just happy little accidents. We're going to get some really interesting marbling on that side there. There we go. I'm going to work that out just a little bit. Look, that's why we do this. Now what you're going to notice as your heat gun is curing this clay is that it's going to go from a liquid to a solid. So you're going to lose some of the glossiness on here. Okay, so we're going to start here at the bottom. Okay, so now if you look inside here, it's not nearly as glossy as it was before. The clay is actually cured. Okay, so now we notice that we got that hard edge kind of cutting through here because it did run. It's because I had a lot of that translucent clay in there. And if you notice, the translucent clay is almost disappeared. It's hard to see. All right, but the black is sticking out pretty well. So now what we're going to do is do a little bit more backfill. We're going to still use the same. I'm going to actually switch from the absolute clear to the translucent clay. Okay, and what this has a little bit of opaqueness to it. It has a little bit of white to it instead of being completely clear. Okay, I'm going to use it directly onto my brush. And we're going to come in here and this is where we're going to start to back paint on all of our clay. And what this is going to allow us to do, and if you have brush strokes, you're going to see brush strokes. Okay, that's going to be so if you want your finish to have a stippled look, stipple with your brush. Okay, whatever you do now is what's going to show up later. Okay, So if you want it to have a very dappled look to it, you want to stipple your clay into it. If you want it to have a really brushed look to it, which would be great for a wood grain, if you wanted to show the wood grain, then you would make sure that you keep the brush strokes visible. And we're going to show some of that using, I'm going to do a wood grain using gold and silver, and then towards the end of the stream I'm going to show you another material that we can add to it to have a little bit more fun with the wood grain and such. So all I'm doing now is back painting, adding another layer of the clay into here so that we have a little bit more thickness and solid coverage over the entire thing. Because remember, when we did this marble line here, we didn't have any clay right on that edge. So now I'm actually adding that clay onto it. And as you can see, we're just painting it on. Okay, and I'm going to stipple because I don't want it to have a brushed look to it. Okay, then we're gonna hit it with the heat gun again. So now you can see it is not as shiny. Okay, it has gone more to a matte. Now here's the thing with the silicone mold is that you want to make sure that you're not pressing and squishing the mold too much, because this is clay and it's just a polymer clay, so it does have flexibility to it. I mean, it's going to have some, so you're going to have some forgiveness, but if you press too hard, you can shatter it. So you want to make sure that you're not overworking it. Now, using our little palette here, we're going to add a little bit of black clay, liquid clay here, just onto our palette, and a little bit of the clear next to it. Okay, then using our brush, we're going to kind of do a little bit of a blend here so that we can get the two clays together to create almost a gray. Okay, you can see it on here. And then I'm going to come in and I'm actually going to paint a wider swath of the clay next to our vein here. Okay, and what this is going to do is it's going to start giving us some depth. Okay, because we have, and again, the little stippling motion. Not the entire thing, because we want to leave some of the white in there, some of the blank in there, but we're just working the gray, and we're just going to kind of come in here and create some depth. Okay, so that's all we're doing. We're just doing, you see that's just a little swath of it. Okay, a little bit of black, a little bit of the clear, and that's just going to help thin it out just a little bit. Just going to come in here, just give ourselves a band. Again, I'm not touching this edge. You want to leave that edge in there, okay? So as you can see here, we've created a little bit of a fuzziness here, that banding that's in there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to come back in with the translucent, not the clear, but the translucent. Actually, I'm not even going to do a class. Well, let's try white here. And I say let's try because we're testing different things out. Now the white is going to be really, really opaque, okay, because it is a solid white. I'm just wiping off my brush here, just pulling some of the liquid clay out of it so I have a cleaner brush. We're going to come in here with the white and we're going to cover that same band that we had there. Now you notice as I'm pulling this material over here, I'm getting no pickup of the color underneath it, and that is because it is completely cured. Okay, and we can actually come over with the white and go over our band completely. Now, I don't want this super thick. I just want enough of clay that I can kind of see behind it, the black where it's at, but I want the white in here to help create some more depth. That's what we're working with here. So I'm going to add a little bit more white clay here. And we're actually going to paint the rest of the interior of the sphere with the white. We're using the stippling motion. Now, why use the stipple motion as opposed to just putting it in here nice and thick? And the reason that is back to the geology lesson. All of these tiny little brush strokes that you see here, these little stipple marks, okay, what that does is it will create more depth. It's going to create little pock marks. And all that rock is just a series of small little bits of sediment that are compressed together, and any kind of air pocket or quartz pocket, that's what a lot of the clear that you see there is just quartz. That's what's going to give us depth and translucence. And so we're going to come in here and we're just adding, we're just stippling on these layers, and we're working in layers, and we're working backwards. Remember, keep that in mind. We are working backwards. Okay, so now that we've got the entire inside coated, we're going to go ahead and heat gun it again. Now that we've got that cured, and you can see it went matte again, and I can touch this and nothing's coming off on my fingers, okay? It is actually solid. All right, now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go back to our translucent and the black, okay? And we're gonna mix that again to get ourselves a little bit more of that lighter gray, and we're gonna work the same band, just making it a little bit bigger. Again, avoiding that one edge there. We want that edge to stay nice and sharp, okay? We want that nice sharp edge in there because that's what's going to give us our marble at the very top, okay? And the top is the exposed surface there. So now we have that nice, now it looks like we're just painting and we're getting rid of all the white, but since we have other layers underneath it, this is actually appearing further and further back as though it was actually carved, okay? I'm going to do a little bit more on this end over here. I need a little bit more of the translucent, just so we can get this nice color in here as well. Now if you notice, I've left that side alone, okay, and I'm just working on the gray here because this the stripe, the actual marbled vein, okay, and we're going to heat that again. As I'm heating this, I am watching the clay. I'm watching the shininess alter, to disappear, okay? I'm watching it go from the liquid, the shiny, shiny liquid, to a semi-gloss, like kind of matte, kind of shine. I mean, it still has some reflectiveness to it, but it's not shiny like water, okay? That's what I'm watching, and that's how I know when the clay is done. Okay, I get asked that a lot. How do I know when I'm done with it? Now, if I reach in here and touch this, now remember it's hot, guys. it's hot. So I've got deadened fingers from doing this for years. But if I reach in here and touch, it's really rough. Okay, there's a lot of texture in here, but that's okay because it's the inside. It's the inside of the sphere. The outside is nice and smooth because the mold is nice and smooth. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with the translucent, just the straight up translucent clay here. Okay, not the clear, but the translucent. I'm going to dump a bunch in here. Bleep. Okay, just make yourselves a little puddle at the bottom there. Happy little puddle. And we're just going to move this, and we're going to coat the entire inside of the mold. Now, playing with this clay, I have noticed that the clearer the medium, the runnier the medium is, okay? The translucent is somewhat runny. The clear is really runny. But the tinted ones, the black and the white, they're actually really thick. Okay, so you're gonna get less movement with that. Now, we're several layers into it, so at this point I can pretty much just brush it on. And what we're doing is we're just adding another layer of thickness here. And this is with the translucent. So it's going to be semi-transparent, okay? And then after this, we're gonna do a layer of white. Okay, so you can see how shiny that is. You can just see my light's reflecting in that really, really well. It's really shiny. Now watch as we heat gun it, and you're gonna see it start to disappear. Now I'm trying to keep all the clay off of the outer edge here, just because I don't want there to be a lot of buildup, so I can actually keep the pieces fairly smooth on top. Because when I'm done, I can actually glue the two sides together to create myself a nice little sphere that looks like some marble. All right, so now watch this as I heat gun it, and you'll see the really bright speckles of light there start to disappear. As you can see there, we've lost the shiny reflectiveness. It's got some semi-gloss to it, but it's not that super shiny wetness. Okay, that's what lets us know that we're done. Now, one thing that my wife will say about me fairly regularly is I've got what's called dog nose. I'm super sensitive to smell. I don't like working with a lot of materials because they don't smell very good to me. They give me a headache, that kind of thing. I will say that this stuff actually fairly pleasant. It's a fairly pleasant odor that comes off of this. It's got a chemical smell. It does not smell like Super Sculpey. Okay, I'm so used to the smell of Sculpey, just from using it for years and years and years. This actually has a completely different smell to it, but it's not an unpleasant smell, and I'm glad that they actually took the time to deal with that. As opposed to having something that's got a really high chemical tang to it, which I'm not a really big fan of. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go back into the straight white, okay, the Sculpey white, okay, and then this one we're going to add another layer, again stippling. We want to stipple this one on, and this is giving us more depth. We don't want brush strokes. So if you see here, you see that brush stroke? See how it has that smear to it? That's actually going to show up. Okay, we want to keep the we want to keep the lack of pattern going on here until we go in backfill. Okay. Good morning to everybody who's joining us. Adding a bit more of the clay. Again, keeping if you notice, I'm not just tapping in the same direction, constantly moving the brush, constantly rotating it and getting and tapping it at a different angle, just to make sure that we don't form patterns. Again, humans love our patterns subconsciously, so we want to make sure that we are not adding a pattern to it. The other thing is the liquid clay does not harden on its own. Okay, it just kind of sits there, so it will. It's okay to kind of leave it on your palette. It is all right. All right, I'm going to clean up that edge again so that we have a nice clean edge when we're done, and I'm going to heat gun this again. I do want to state that while we are curing this clay with the heat gun, I will at the end of this go in and give it a finished bake in the oven. Okay, this is the quick cure with the heat gun is just allowing me to keep working with the material and adding layers to it, but I always want to make sure that I get a good solid bake all the way through it. So we will put it back into the oven when we're done. As I mentioned before, my oven is preheated already to 270 degrees Fahrenheit. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add one more run of the gray behind using the translucent and the black. I'm going to add a little bit more translucent to my tray there. So we have the translucent and the black. And we're going to add, again, stippling, one more layer. Not coming up against that edge there. One more layer of the banding there. Okay. Now we don't want to come into contact with this other layer. We want to make sure that we leave a gap there, even if it's just a slight gap. We want to make sure that there is a gap left there, because in reality those two shall never meet. They are the Romeo and Juliet of marble veining from two different households. Never shall the two meet. There we go. So we just want to get a nice another line there, and then again on this one here. All right, so we have that. This could be our last one. Now what we can do is I'm going to clean up my brush. We're going to heat this up one more time, and then we're going to go in and do two more layers of the white, and then we'll finish it off. So now that is, in theory, done, okay? But it's a skin. It's not a finished product. If I tried to take this out of the mold, I could, but it would be like a rice paper. It's going to be super, super thin. It's not going to have much substance to it. The only way to really get it to have the ability to actually handle it is to backfill it, okay? you can see here, I backfilled this, and you can see there's some glitter in there. This is the Sculpey accent, the Primo Sculpey accents, and it actually has some glitter built into the clay itself. And what I did is I backfilled it, and you can see some of the glitter on the inside of this is actually coming through, but that's what most of this white is the backfill of the clay. So what we can do is we can play with that. All right, we can play with that by adding different colors to the backfill, because while it looks opaque right now, that's because we're against a white mold. Okay, but if I was to take this out, most of this would be fairly translucent. Because we are using that stippling technique with the opaque white, and we had many layers of the semi-translucent and the white in there to help give us a lot of depth. So what we can do is add some color back behind it. I'm going to use this, well, just for demonstration purposes. We're going to use something with a high contrast. Okay, so this is another Primo clay from Super Sculpey, and you can see here it's got, I'll see if I can zoom in on the focus here. We're going to, there you go. You can see all that sparkly in there. Okay, this is their copper clay. All right, and it's copper with, and it actually has like a copper and a silver glitter to it. It's hard to see the copper color. It is in there if you look at it closely. And this is their Primo clay. Okay, this is their high-end clays that they offer, which is really nice for those people who make jewelry and such. This material is going to be more heavy duty. Make sure we get that diphthong in the U there. Okay, so we're going to close up our clays, make sure they're closed, more because they're going to spill than they will actually evaporate or anything like that. So we're going to put those off to the side while we're working. Make sure our brand name is out, dead centered. Okay, so here we go. Now the good thing about this clay is it is a really high-end clay. It holds its shape well. I would liken it a lot to the Super Sculpey Hard as far as its density goes, but medium as far as its workability goes. Now, if you play with Sculpey as much as I have throughout the years, you can tell by the feel of it how well it's. I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it. To me, it's a lot like playing with, like if you're baking and you're using something that has butter in it. If the butter is completely melted, you get something that's like a Sculpey 3. Or a Sculpey regular Sculpey. If the butter is somewhat chilled, you get a Super Sculpey, and if the butter is ice cold, you get a Super Sculpey medium or hard. Okay, I would say this has the butter consistency of a medium. Okay, it's workable, as you can see here. It is actually workable, and this is nice fresh clay. I always talk about doing the pull test. We can pull it, and you can see we're actually going to get some, but it is a higher grade clay. It is like the hard. Okay, this is meant to keep its shape, and to be workable into smaller areas. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm going to actually take this clay and I'm going to thin it out. I need about a 1/16 of an inch. Okay, I seasoned the clay by working with it. Okay, so now it's actually got some mobility to it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to flatten it out, but I'm going to keep it in a line, and there's a reason for this. Okay, we can see where our marble is here still. This is the area that's completely white. Here's our hard edge on that side, and here's the hard edge on this side, and I can see that there's a white band there and the white area there. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to backfill into the white areas. Okay, not the black areas, because that's not going to really show anything because we've got a lack of light. It's going to be dark. Okay, but we have these areas of just pure white that are going to be translucent. Okay, and so we can actually come in here and backfill those areas with a little bit of this different colored clay, and it will show up. It will be it'll be in the depth of it. Okay, now when we pull this out, it's not going to be copper, black, and whatnot. If we wanted to do that, we would work with one of the other colors of the liquid clay. Here we're just going to we're going for depth, like there's a hidden surprise inside the piece here. Okay, now if we want more of this color to show up, we use less of the opaque white and more and more of the translucent or even the clear, and then we put this behind it. Now, what is another, instead of just marble, okay, what is something else that we can use this technique for? This backfill technique using the clear and a color or even a different kind of clay would be wonderful for doing eyeballs. Okay, especially if you've got a half sphere like this, if you do a few coats of the clear, because you're going to get a really nice smooth finish on the outside, and then you go in there and you start working with your bits of clay on the inside using the colors, and then even starting with a black dot in the center for the pupil, and then working the color, the iris around it with different colored clays with that clear already in there. And then you can do your veining in there with your reds and such, and then you go in and you backfill out of it. You can actually get more and more depth to it, and having these kind of fun colors in here is going to really help to make that stand out. So I've got a bit of the copper there. We're going to work a little bit more and put it into this line over here as well. So I'm just going to take the clay, and as you can see, when it comes off, I mean, it's hard, it's rigid, okay? But I know that this clay is as fresh as it's going to get, because this is straight from Polyform, okay? So this is ideal clay. And while I'm working this clay and kind of getting it into a nice pliable place here, we're kind of warming it up, we're seasoning the clay here. I just want to remind you that if you do buy clay and you know that your clay is in a good shape, a good place, it's a happy clay that is ready and primed to be used, and you're not going to use it right away, remember to freeze it. Take a little piece like this. I like to wrap mine in either aluminum foil or into a little bit of saran wrap, okay? Make sure it's nice and sealed tight. And then what you can do is put that into the freezer. And then when you're ready to use it, pull it out about 10, 12 hours before you're ready to use it. Let it sit at room temperature, and it will be as fresh as the day you put it in there. That's the great thing about it. I get 8-pound boxes of Super Sculpey. Like these monster boxes full of Super Sculpey. And while I do use a lot of clay in my projects, I don't use it all the time. And I don't use it very quickly. And if you just leave it out in the open air, it's going to slowly leach out the polymer that keeps it pliable. And so to stop that from happening, pop it in the freezer. Yep. Little life lesson there. And then look, we've got this nice seasoned bit of clay. And I mean, it's good clay. Look at that. I mean, we get a lot of build from it. But when I first started out, it's hard, okay? Because it's cold. Okay, it's not frozen, but it's just room temperature, and it hardens up. But that's because it is a it's the professional clay. It's the primo clay, and they make it so that it takes a little bit longer to season it so that it becomes more pliable. But once it's workable, it's really good clay, and it's got a really nice texture to it. It's not as soft as Super Sculpey. It's that medium quality, so you can still work with it. Now I know that I've also got that little bit of white area that kind of runs through here, so that's where I'm going to put this next piece of copper clay. And it's okay if it goes into the other areas as well. It's just not going to be visible, and so I don't want to spend too much. Now keep in mind I'm adding back pressure to my mold because I don't want to crack the clay that's there. Okay, I want to keep that clay that's the liquid clay that we've cured. We want to keep that from breaking. We don't want that to snap off. So we're just kind of pressing it into there, but I'm adding some back pressure on there so that we don't fracture the clay on the end. Okay, so now we've got the areas that are actually opaque. This is going to be the black part of the marble. So is this over here. We need to still backfill this because this is still too thin to be by itself. Okay, we can use any clay that we want in here. We can use regular Sculpey, we can use some Super Sculpey, we can use any of our primos. The thing is the primos are more expensive because they are a higher end quality accent clay. They are not like a base clay. All right, Super Sculpey is a great base clay. So let me grab some of my Super Sculpey. Okay, here's my big block O Super Sculpey. And again, I'm going to show you the pull test for those of you who are new to any of my Sculpey ones. Just want to take a piece of the clay off of the block there. Okay, don't work it yet. We don't want to season it. We just want to kind of get it into a rough ball shape. Okay, it's still cold. You want to pinch it between your finger and your thumb, both hands, and give it a pull. Okay? You see that taper that we get there? That little teardrop taper? That's what you're looking for. The better the taper, the thinner the taper. See that taper? That's what we're looking for. That means that this clay has the just right amount of polymer and the clay. It has not evaporated too much. It's in really, really good shape. Okay, this is freezable clay. This is clay that I would take out, put to the freezer, and then save for forever and a day until I'm ready to use it. This is in really good shape. If you pull it, and I'll show you. Now, keep in mind, this is the Primo clay. It's what it's supposed to do at this point. But if you got Super Sculpey and you went and you made your ball with it really quickly, like that, and then you pulled it, and it broke like that, that means that the polymer has mostly evaporated from the clay, and that it's not good Super Sculpey. Okay, not good Super Sculpey. The Primo, it can do this, okay, because we haven't worked it yet. We haven't gotten the butter to the right temperature, the polymer clay to the polymer to the right temperature yet. But as far as like seeing whether or not your Super Sculpey is in a good shape, that is how we can do that. Now, one of the other things that you can do with this Liquid Sculpey that we'll be doing a little bit more when we get into doing some of the woods and stuff like that for other faux finishes is that we can use it as an adhesive as well. It's not as good as again, it's going to create a thin layer of clay in between them, but you can use it as a gap fill as well, because it is thick enough that you can go in there and you can actually fix some of your any kind of cracks or whatnot in there as well, because it is literally a liquid version of the clay, and so you can use it as a glue, especially if you're working with some of the transparents and stuff. All right, so now that we've got this clay in a good seasoned state, I'm going to go in here. I'm just going to add it to the rest of the sphere, just pressing lightly so we can get a nice clean edge here with some backfill, because you need this material here to backfill into the mold so that you're not just relying on the really, really thin part of the clay to hold its shape, the liquid part of the clay to hold its shape. We want to make sure that we've got some meat behind it. Okay, this is backfills. And again, the Super Sculpey, or the Sculpey inside of the silicone mold here. And you can buy silicone molds, you can make your own. This is one that I made, but you can go out and buy them. They make, I believe Polyform even has their own line of silicone molds that you can purchase as well. I believe I got one from my middle child who loves the sculpt. I got him some faces and hands because I know that's the harder thing to sculpt, especially when you're 7. And so I got him some of those so he can just kind of press the clay into it. Now you can also paint some of this clay into it as well, like we're doing here. And so he can actually get some really nice detail without having to paint the clay when it's done, which is really, really nice. All right, so the last piece of clay here we're gonna do, just again, this is just a backfill to kind of help the clay to hold its shape. There we go. So now we've got that in there, okay? And it's just, again, just a backfill, just something to kind of give it a little bit of structure, a little bit of hardness to it, some thickness to it, so that it's not just reliant on the liquid thin clay to hold itself. We're gonna go pop this into the oven. My oven is already preheated. This is less than 1/4 of an inch thick, so I know it's only gonna take about 15 minutes to cure. So let me go pop this into the oven. I will be right back. Now, let us remove our marble. Look how well that comes out of the silicone mold there. And we can see, now you can see how thin that clay actually is. And this is still pretty warm, so it's got a little bit of flexibility to it, but once it cures completely, it will have less in there. But if we look here, let me see if I can get the zoom to focus more on the sphere here. There we go. You see the white and the translucency that kind of comes through there? Okay, now let's take, except that it might be too bright in my studio for this, but you can actually get a light in here and it actually shows the translucency of it. but we've got all different shades of translucency of this marble kind of running through here. Now what we can do is we can hit this with some gloss coat and actually gloss this, and it's going to look like a really nice marble. And the nice thing is it's the clay, okay? It's not a paint. It can't be rubbed off. Okay, we've got really good stippling in here, and modeling and depth in this. It's, you know, I'll take some really good pictures and put it up on Instagram so you guys can see the depth in it. But there is a lot of depth going on with this, and it really looks like that vein of black that's here moves deeper into the mold, into the marble there. And then if we wanted to, we could actually take these two pieces, if you married your marbles together so that they were the same. Okay, you can actually make marble spheres here. But if you look, like this one here is just got a white backer, and this one here has that coppery color. Okay, and so it has more depth in color to it than just the plain white. Okay, so your backer color makes a difference as well into how well it turns out. So you actually get some really nice color variance depending on what you use as far as your backer color goes and how opaque it is. Okay, like this one here, I think we might be able to, yeah, it's still going to be, well, you can kind of see it on the bottom there, how translucent it is. So you could actually throw some light into it. It helps if my flashlight wasn't also out of batteries. There we go. So you can see how translucent that is. So you can get some nice effects with it. Okay, so let's see if we can go back to here. Well, thank you guys again for sticking with me on this fun-filled sponsored stream, sponsored by Polyform, the makers of Super Sculpey. I'm Paul Pape of Paul Pape Designs. You can follow me at twitch.tv/Paul Pape Designs. And until next time, remember to work smarter, not harder, and have fun with your Polyform, Super Sculpey, and Sculpey stuff.